We have with us today, before we begin, it's worth to mention we have with us the author of the Healing Haggadah, Rabbi Michael Friedman, friend extraordinaire, teacher extraordinaire, passing over trauma.
Thank you.
Rabbi Michael's new Haggadah in stores. Hit that subscribe, push that like. Totally recommend it. He's a seasoned mental health professional. NafshiWellness.org or Mosaic Press or Amazon or Apple Podcast, Spotify Podcast. They don't always do that, or recommend it for the chevra. Everyone should get it. The Healing Haggadah, Passing Over Trauma, Michael Friedman. Hit that subscribe. Okay, now let's remember where we are in this world. So we're learning again. We're learning the Orot section. We're learning Rav Kook Sefer Orot, the Zeronim section. We have been weeding through, I would say, the piece Yisurim Mamrekim on suffering that cleanses, that heals. And this is the longest piece in this section. Most pieces, as we saw, was only 1 or 2 pages. This piece is like a lot of pages, so it's been the most amount of classes. And I hope it's not getting too repetitive or redundant for people, about the same ideas kind of tossing over and over. So what I'm thinking is just a roadmap. There'll probably be, maybe not including today, 2 more classes. What I'm thinking is today we'll probably finish the week after, and then the week after to do an overview chazara of the whole piece from beginning to end, because it takes lots of twists and turns, but just to go kind of paragraph by paragraph so we could get the full picture of the opus of what he's saying. And then we're moving on in the section of Zeronim. So what are we learning about? What are we learning about? So really what we're talking about here is darkness's ability to bring out light. That through darkness comes light. That whenever there's kfira in the world, foreign ideologies, whether that is internal kfira of denying Hashem's hashgacha pratis, or being in doubt, being uncertain, or whether that is national kfira, whether that is foreign ideologies. To name a few, we have socialism, Marxism, liberalism, communism, LGBTQ+, right? Of course, it's not a rail. My heart goes out to anyone in that area, but you have everything in the world news about the Jews and Israel and genocide and war, everything, foreign ideologies. Hashem uses history as a way to bring about light. That whenever there is suffering in history, different ideologies come and go, as we know, that helps ultimately clarify all that is light, all that is good, all that is justice. So what happens is when darkness comes to the world, it looks like Emunah, it looks like faith and religion has taken a hit. It looks like things have become disintegrated. It looks like a big yerida. But Rav Kook is explaining, this is the wide lens of Emunah. This is the deep Emunah that we have to have. That when foreign things come to the world, when choshech comes to the world, it's only to help clarify what is light, what is good, what are we really about. And Rav Kook would definitely say that, in my view, regarding the world religions, Christianity, Islam, Muslim, Buddhism, all the religions coming to the world, ultimately, as the Rambam says, to spread monotheism in the world, to spread the divine light. But it looks like confusion. It looks like, oh no, it looks like darkness, right? But really, ultimately, that is helping us clarify, that is Hashem's hashgacha pratis. Remember, in the world of Rav Kook, there's nothing outside Hashem, right? So this is ultimately the wide lens of Emunah, deep Emunah, of Hashem's hashgacha pratis, in order to bring about the greater redemption, in order to help us clarify, have deeper Emunah, be real with ourselves. Like when a person has suffering, when a person has difficulties, when we use those difficulties to look inwards and learn about ourselves, to grow from the difficulties, that is the Emunah of the choshech. The Emunah of the darkness is that Hashem uses darkness in order to raise us levels, even though it looks like a yerida, even though it looks like a difficult thing, it looks like painful, and it is painful, nevertheless, that is Hashem's hashgacha pratis in order to help us grow, in order to help us become wiser. Called it advanced evolution, help us evolve as human beings, or to help us adultify. For some of us who need to adultify, that would be me, to help us become more mature, low down, want to get a little higher. So that's what we're learning about. This reminded me of a Gemara. It's the only Gemara that I know. It's a Gemara in Shabbos 77b. I woke up to this. Like once in a million years, I wake up to a Gemara because I was looking at this before I went to bed. So once in a million years, I wake up to a Gemara, and this was that was this morning. It says Gemara in Shabbos 77b, Ayin Zayin Amud Bes. It says Amar Lei. It's Rab Zera talking to Reb Yehuda, and they're having a small conversation back and forth with each other. So it says Amar Lei, my taima. Ize miskan beresha v'hader imre. Why is it that the goats, the dark ones, are first v'hader imre, and afterwards are the lighter ones? Why do the dark goats walk first, and then the white goats? Why do? I've been wondering about that question my whole life. Okay, so he says, Amar le kibraisa shel olam. It's like the creation of the world. The beresha chashucha v'hader nehora. In the beginning, it is darkness, and afterwards, it is light. So, what is he asking? Why is it in life darkness always comes before light? And the reason is v'aretz haisa tohu v'vohu v'choshech al pnei pa'or. Then Hashem created light. Forgot the pasuk, right? That Hashem created darkness, that Hashem created light. So he wanted to know, why is it that we have to suffer so much? Why is it when these goats go, they seemingly, we all want things in life to go keseder. We want things to go straight. I just want it to be good, But first there has to be darkness, and then there has to be light. I would say, Chatasi Maskir Hayom, I was out with my wife, we went away for a few days, and we were able to watch this movie, and it's a Jim Carrey movie, and one of the things in the movie is that they get their memories erased, okay? And this way you could forget about the past. If you have this operation to get your memory erased, you forget about the past, and now you wake up and everything's good. And one of the deep messages of the movie is that, like in the end, when they get their memory erased, it messes everything up, basically. And what it is that if we had no memory, what the movie shows is that if we had no memory and the suffering was erased, we would not know of the good moments in life. And it's valuable to go through the suffering to appreciate the goodness, right? If we just got it all, we'd be zombified, And if we delete all the bad memories, all the hardships in life, so then we would just be mindless human beings, and to appreciate the suffering, to appreciate the difficulties, to appreciate the kfiras when they come to the world. Okay, that was my TED Talk. Okay, now inside the Sefer. So where are we up to? So we're talking about, if you have the pages over here, the second paragraph says mitkufa litkufa. Mitkufa litkufa, holechet umitbareret. Do you see that? You see it, Michael? Mitkufa litkufa. There you go. You have it. Next page. So again, all this we're talking about how when kfira comes to the world, when darkness comes to the world, it's ultimately to bring out a greater light. And he's going to go into this in depth. And there's an overlay over here of a little bit what he's talking about is, he's not saying this explicitly outright, but he's also saying this, this is underlining this, that the early Zionists came to and he's responding. He's talking not only this, he's talking in general, but the early Zionists, they came with this big kfira to deny the Torah, right? To say that now you don't have to, the halacha was the thing that preserved us through Galus, was the mitzvahs and halacha. But now we have Zionism, we have Israel, we have a land. And what's going to preserve us now? That was good up until Galus. But now that we have Eretz Yisrael, now the Jews are going to have their own land. You don't need the mitzvahs in order to preserve you. So they saw the mitzvahs as a pickling jar, right? And halach as a pickling jar, and Torah as a pickling jar. That was good to preserve our Jewish identity. But now that we have Eretz Yisrael, we have our own land, that will preserve our identity, and therefore you no longer need to have the mitzvahs and Torah. Irrelevant. Oispatel, because we have Eretz Yisrael. That was their ideology, right? Now he's explaining. Mitzkufa litzkufa holechet umitbareret hata'arovet shalamunas hayichud hatahora im mechashake hagshama. From generation to generation, from time period to time period, hulechet umitbareret, it goes and it gets clarified, the mixing of pure emunah in oneness with the darkness of hagshama, corporalization, making Hashem physical. Ubechol pam shechelik yadua mehagshama nofel, and every time when a part of this physicality of the idea of corporeality of thinking God is physical falls, of basically means like a false religious idea. Nidme ki'ilu hemuna nofeles, right? It looks as if faith has fallen. The achar kach mitgale shelo nafla hemuna ki'im nisbarara. So when the foreign ideology of hagshama comes to the world, it looks like darkness and emunah has fallen, like we've been explaining, right? But really, you should know, emunah has not fallen. It's only been clarified. It's been somewhat elevated in that sense. B'yamim ha'achronim l'shivas haruach ha'noshi el sfiras ha'emunah. In the b'yamim ha'achronim, in later days, l'shivas haruach ha'noshi el sfiras ha'emunah. When the spirit of man has returned to the conversation or the sphere, the realm of faith, habara nofeles, the shaft falls. Klipa hagshama achrona hadaka, the shaft of the hagshama achrona hadaka, of the understanding God is physical, right? Falls. Shehi yachash hamatzias beklalus el elhus, that is the relationship of God's relationship to existence. Again, this is more philosophical, but we gave the introduction in order to preempt some of these questions. We'll get clear as we learn. Right? Elohus shebe'emes kol ma she'anu magdirim b'mitzias hu muflag Elohus be'erech bilti nerech. So in the later days, there's this idea that he's going to say that it's Hashem's. I guess we'll get to it, right? But he's just setting the premise that every time there's darkness and kfira that comes to the world, that is only to separate the goodness from the darkness, the chaff from the wheat, right? Tzalela shel shlila zu domim hem l'kfira. The shadows of shlila zu, of this negative identity of Hashem, is domim l'kfira. Now he's working with the Rambam's understanding of saying you can't say what Hashem is, you could only say what Hashem isn't. That's called Hashem's negative identity. Hashem isn't this, Hashem isn't that, Hashem isn't all these things, because like we've been building up this theme that he's working from the Rambam, the Mor Nevuchim, that any words you're going to try to put around Hashem is not actually going to be capture what Hashem is, because Hashem is beyond all words, all vocabulary, all everything. So when this idea of shlila, which is ultimately rooted in kedusha, of you can't say what Hashem is, that is similar to kfira. Why is it similar to kfira? Because Hashem, it's as if you're pushing Hashem far away from the world, because you're saying Hashem is so great, Hashem is beyond this world, right? So by saying Hashem has a negative identity of shlila, it sounds like it's doma kfira, because you're saying Hashem doesn't have anything to do with this world, like Christianity, right? Hashem doesn't have anything to do with this world, right? So just, praise Yeshka at the end of the day, and then you get it, right? So you don't have to act a certain way. Your morality doesn't have to be a certain way. Your behavior doesn't have to be a certain way, because it's not kashur to anything, because Hashem is so far beyond this world, right? So when a person's talking about shlila, Hashem's infinite light, making Hashem's infinitude has in it the hints of kfira, like your glasses are fogging from the coffee, right? Hashem has in it the granules of kfira, because in a certain way, it's like you're pushing Hashem away from the world. It's amazing, right? So tzlaleha shel tzlila zu domin heim l'kfira. The shadows of Hashem's negative identity is similar to kfira. Ma shebe'emes yamalo yoser el yona shebe'emuna kishehi mitbareret yafe. But you should know Hashem's shlila, Hashem's negative identity, Hashem's vastness, if you will, right, is really rooted in it the greatest levels of depths of profound emunah in itself, when it's actually clarified. Umisragel haruach lahakshiv es keshev ha'emunah al pi ha'maisim v'al pi hashpaos. And the spirit needs to be accustomed to understand and pay attention to the al pi ha'maisim, according to its actions and according to the influence, hofas havaya v'hofas hator v'amusar, through the appearance of Torah and the appearance of morality, of Torah Musar. Hadash Elohus mashpas el mitzios umamelehi lamayla meha mitzios. We need to know that Hashem is influence all of existence, and because of that, He's above existence. Right? This is what the Zohar is. The Zohar says Hashem is malei kol almin. Hashem fills all the worlds, and because Hashem fills all the worlds, that implies He's also sovev kol almin. He surrounds all the worlds. Not only does Hashem in the world, but Hashem is beyond the world, right? So when we talk about kfira, like you read someone like Yuval Harari in Homo Deus and his other books that he's written, and he's among the famous that he's Israeli, he's a Jew, of course, right? That shows that there is a God, that of course a Jew has to have the biggest book on kfira, right? The biggest books on kfira, right? So by pushing, right, by pushing Hashem, by looking at the world and saying that there is no God, in it is the granules of Emunah, because it's true, Hashem is beyond the world, but Hashem also fills the world. Right? So when a kfira, a dark ideology, comes to the world, that helps us see from the depths within it when we bring it back into the fold of Torah and we clarify what is the Torah's comment on this thing. Right? So it's like right? So we bring it back into the circle. Hadash Elohus mashpas et hamasiyas hamitziut umamelehi lamayla me'atzius. Know that God influences all the world, and therefore He's beyond all the world simultaneously. V'chozeret hakfira hadimyonit hamitaheres mitumasa lemuroi me'hamuna hayoser tahora. Then it brings the kfira now returns and falls from its false imagination, becomes purified from its impurity in order to have its elevated level of pure emunah. Right? It's like Rabbi Nachman says, like, when you have to bring the sadness, you have to bring the joy back into the circle. You have to bring the sadness back into the circle, right? Like people are dancing in Yalgav Anachas outside the circle, and now the sadness, it's one thing when you're happy not to be sad. It's another thing when you're happy to bring the sadness back into the circle and have it transform into happiness also, right? So when we clarify what this darkness is really about, what this ideology is really about, and what's the Torah's commentary on it, that itself brings about deeper and greater emunah, right? So the kvira comes to the dark, right? Bereisha chashucha v'hadar nehora. First, it's darkness, and then it was light, right? And not only does Hashem do this on an individual level, but Hashem uses the entire world history in order to clarify this, right? This is what we once said in a shiur before, that Rav Kook writes, Hashem's zroa netuya, Hashem's outstretched arm is the long arm of history, that Hashem is using history in order to constantly bring about the geula and clarify all that is pure, all that is just, and all that is light. And we have to have deep emunah to appreciate this. Like you look at Islam and radical jihadiness, and you look at all these things, like what the heck, like what a big darkness in the world. And it's true, it's darkness. But somehow Rav Kook is teaching us that there's a deeper emunah here, that this is only clarifying what is good, right? It's like in mental health, they say, like, what's one of the big ways to, one of the big protective factors to protect a person from abuse is to have healthy, positive relationships in their life. Because if you have a healthy relationship, you now know what a distorted relationship and an unhealthy relationship is. So you have what to counterbalance it and contrast it, right? So when you have darkness that comes to the world and you have light in stark contrast to that darkness, now you can know what's healthy and what's not healthy. Right? That the kfira is the thing that brings about the goodness and the light and the further clarification. The amnam, tzricha hi shlilat hametzias hazos. And however, we need this shlilat hametzias hazos, this negative ideology about existence, Hachozeres limkur kol havayaso, to return to its source of all of existence. Ve'esaniyut hayoter tamsitit, and with strength that is more fundamental. Shal hadar kol hametzias, of the beauty of all its majesty, all of its existence. Bina mehoderes shebecho yom tzarich lahalos osa limikor taharas. And bina mehoderes, bina is a deep, penetrating, well-rounded understanding. Shebecho yom, of every day, tzarich lahalos osa limikor taharasa. We need to bring it back to its pure source, right? As Rabbinical says, yesh inyan shakol mahapech l'tova. There is something called everything gets flipped for the good, right? When we're able to clarify and go into the darkness by way of the tzaddikim teaching us how to go into the darkness, then we have a deeper emunah, and the kfiras in our lives and the kfiras in the world begin to fall like wheat and chaff. You have to love Rav Kook. And again, just to put the historical context on this, he's talking about the Zionists, right? He's talking about the Zionists who came and said, what do we need the Torah for? We have a land. We have a land, and that is going to preserve us. We no longer need halacha. But Rav Kook, with the eyes of the tzaddikim, Rav Kook was showing us how this kfira just comes to the world, that when you push God out of the picture, that helps bring it back into the fold, right? That helps. It's like if you take a fly. I once saw this many years ago, that if you take a fly and they did genetic mutations on flies. So I once saw this experiment, right? That they kept mutating a fly farther, and the farthest out that they were able to mutate a fly, when they continued mutating it, it started to reverse course and come back to itself, to its original form, right? So it's like when there's darkness, dark, at the darkest part of the night, that's when it starts to turn light again. We start to mutate back to our original form, right? Isn't that amazing? It's amazing, right? Bereisha chashucha and hadar nahora. Now listen to what Rav Kook's going to say. But wait, there's more. If that was amazing, then everything's amazing in the world of Rav Kook. You know, I haven't seen anything that hasn't been amazing. You know, Now he's going to say, why don't we have this deep emunah? Why don't we see the world like this? Why don't we, right? To have this deep emunah. Amnam nivgemes hi emunah ayidei bitula shel haTorah elyona. But you should know that emunah is blemished through the not learning of the high Torah. I'll read that again. Amnam nifgemes hi emunah ayidei bitula shel Torah elyona. Emunah is blemished, it's darkened, because we do not learn Pnimius HaTorah. We stop learning Pnimius. We stop learning Kabbalah. We stop learning, whether it's Chassidus, or whether it's Talmidei Hagra, whether it's the Ramchal, whether it's Rabbi Nachman, whether it's Bilvavi, whether it's Rav Kook. We stop learning Pnimius HaTorah, the Torah Elyona. And because we stopped learning the Torah Elyona, Emunah has taken a hit. Now, Rav Kook writes about the need to learn Pnimius HaTorah in many, many places. He writes about this, but we stopped learning it, right? So Torah is like this linear, it becomes like this very brainy, intellectual, like linear, lifeless, dry type of thing, Like, who wants that? Like the famous metaphor, they say, you like potato kugel? Sure, but you like it when it's hot. When it's a hot potato kugel, that's when it's the best. You take Torah and you learn it, infuse it with Pnimius HaTorah, right? As the Meshech Chochmah writes, and the Sifrei Yir writes, the Tanya writes, that mitzvah without... It's a very poetic Hebrew words, they're slipping my mind. But basically, a mitzvah without a soul is like a bird without wings. Right? A bird without wings doesn't go anywhere. A mitzvah without a soul, what does it do? Right? That we have to bring the nishmasa de'araisa, the Pnimius HaTorah, like what this shiur is attempting to do, to put it back on the table. That our mitzvahs should be filled with urechimu dechilu, with love and fear, to bring back the soul of our mitzvahs, that we don't have flyingless mitzvahs without wings. It's like there's a story of the Baal Shem Tov. It's a little misnagdish story, but it's worth it to say. The story of the Baal Shem Tov, that he was once showing off his base medrash to a Rosh Hashiva. And he's, you know the story, Moshe? Okay, you probably know it, right? He was once showing off his shul to a Rosh Hashiva. And, the Rosh Hashiva was once showing his shul off to the Baal Shem. And the Rosh Hashiva walked in and said, "Here's my shul." And the Baal Shem Tov said, "Wow, it's full of tefillas. Amazing." And the Rosh Hashiva said, "Thank you. We worked really, really hard." The Baal Shem Tov said, "No, your tefillas never went beyond the roof. The shul is full of tefillas. They haven't gone anywhere." Right? Amazing, right? That mitzvahs without the nishmasa, the Torah Elyona, mitzvahs without the Pnimius HaTorah, it stays. It could stay, right? That's why we need to learn Pnimius. We need to connect to the true tzaddikim. That Pnimius HaTorah brings to the recognition of the greatness of God. As Rabbi Nachman said, God is great. Hashlemus Elyona she'ein la sof ve'erech. The Hashlemus Elyona, the perfect elevated understanding, she'ein la sof ve'erech, that has infinity, right? Hashem's light is Giloy Ein Sof, ve'erech, and has unlimited value. Ve'ena nosenes es pri hatov she'itzrich alates. But if you're not learning Pnimius HaTorah, the Torah Elyona, it doesn't give forth the right fruit that it needs to give. It doesn't elevate the souls in the way in order to lift them up from their low state. And then shame and embarrassment begins to increase within the Jewish soul. But Jewish Emunah is embedded and entrenched in the Ein Sof, which goes beyond any idea of Emunah, right? There's Emunah, and then there's ideas of Emunah, and then there's, right, we have some idea of Emunah, but Emunah itself is rooted in the Ein Sof. Emunah itself is rooted in the highest of highest place, not the concept of Emunah. We're not talking about the concept of Emunah. There's some concept, some intellectual concept of Emunah. But we're talking about the experience of Emunah and the light of Emunah from beyond the world of Atzilus, the light of Emunah that comes from the Hey Giluyim, from the light of the Ein Sof, which is the first Giloy before the Kav Tzimtzum. We're talking about the highest level of Emunah. And therefore, the Jewish Emunah, the Emunah of Yisrael, is the ideal of Emunah, and it's the Emunah of the future. As it says, Ekyeh asher ehyeh, it will be what I will be. We have all Emunah that the future is going to be better, right? I say I don't have Emunah for much, but I know that things will evolve to be good one day, right? Ekyeh asher ehyeh, I will be what I will be. It's how Hashem revealed Himself to Moshe Rabbeinu by the Sneh. Hagavoa be'ein orech mitochen shel emunah sova. And Emunah in the future is greater than any Emunah that a person could have even in the current. Harbe madregos, right? That's the last of the animamins that we believe in Tchias HaMesim. The animamim of Tchias HaMesim could be the most important of the animamims. The Chafetz Chaim used to say because that Emunah includes all the other Emunahs. If I believe in Tchias HaMesim and the future, that means I believe in the Torah's Moshe, and I believe that Hashem's not going to flip us out, and I believe in Hashem's Hashgacha Elyona, and I believe in that there's one Torah and that there's one God. So we have the Emunah in the future is the greatest Emunah that one could have. Harbe madregos b'mored yored hu atziyar ruchani. Right? Many levels does Emunah have to go down in its spiritual imagination. Ad kidei la'akros b'shem emunas Yisrael, until it gets filtered down that we call it Jewish Emunah, be'etzem tor ha'emunah mamish, right? That it should actually be Emunah, v'lo b'tor ha'ideel Emunah, and not something that's just a conceptual Emunah. Be'emunah atzma chal pegam ha'kvira, right? In the Emunah itself, kvira and doubt creep in. Aval ba'ha'ideel emuni ein pegam ha'kvira megi'a klal. But in the ideal, in the perfect type of Emunah that one could have, there's no blemishes at all. Let's just explain that again. There's conceptual Emunah, and then there is real Emunah, right? It's like there's the space of Emunah that goes beyond intellect, like Reb Leibish was talking about at the Kiddush the other day, right? There's this space There's this space of Emunah that you could sense in your being, not some concept of Emunah that I'm trying to connect to, some intellectual exercise. But there's a space of Emunah, and that Emunah comes from the highest of the highest places. That Emunah comes, right? There were Hey Giluyim, when Hashem created the world. There was the Giloy Ein Sof, then there was the Giloy Avi Erla, and then there was the Giloy Hatzim, the Kava Tzimtzum, right? And then there was the Giloy of the Arba Alamas, Atzilas, Bria, Yisira, and Atziya, right? All the way down to us. And the deep Emunah, real Emunah, comes from the highest of the highest places. It comes from beyond the Giloy Ein Sof, from the first revelation, when Hashem decided to make God himself as the light of his life. That is Emunah, right? So our Emunah has the ability we have to learn deep Emunah. And we have to understand that Hashem is always guiding the world to a greater place. And having this Emunah in the future and learning Pnimi Satorah connects us to that place. Hu lamala memusag hakfira, which is beyond the understanding and perceptions of kfira. Next page. Kishem shehu lamala memusag emunah. Right? That even in emunah, this understanding is even beyond the word of emunah. Right? That using the word emunah would also take away from this amazing, amazing place of emunah. Right? Again, it's hard to find the words here. Hakfira ein lo ideal amiti. Kfira has no real purpose. El acher itrases velo avin peirin. It is a foreign god that rots and that does not give fruit. Hayesh v'atohu einam noisne me'uma. And chaos and despondency and discouragement doesn't give anything at all. Right? There's no faith in that. Al kain ein makom la'adil hipoch me'adil shel muna. Therefore, when we talk about, he's going to say something subtle over here. Therefore, when we talk about emunah, of the perfect emunah, of emunah that comes from a very high place, from the Torah Elyona, there's no opposite counterpart to that. He's going to explain why. Af api sheyesh inyan shel hipoch v'kabbalas emunah guf emunah. Right? Even though there is a way that hakabbalas emunah is guf emunah, that he's going to explain. Shar chamishim haidil emunah, that there's this place of emunah called the 50th gate. That is the emunah beyond emunah. Shigam eitzel Moshe hayali ha'adiyah. Right? Even Moshe tried to reach this level. He wanted to see Hashem panim al panim. He wanted to see Hashem face to face. Shelo nite lo, but Hashem didn't give him permission to see into the Shar Chamishim. Einu b'metzias she'enei nitin lo einenu b'metzias b'klipa. Because the Shar Chamishim, the highest level, even on Moshe's level of wanting to see the Shar Chamishim, of seeing Hashem panim al panim, face to face, Hashem didn't let him see in that. But in that place of pure white light, in that place of Shar Chamishim, in that place, there is no klipa at all. In that place, it's only divinity. There's no counterpart of chaff that surrounds the nugget in it. There is no outer shell. It's pure white light and divinity. And that's the level that even Moshe wasn't able to get to, that Hashem didn't give him to that level. But there is a place of emunah beyond emunah. There is a place of a space where it's just oneness. It's just God. It's just divinity. And the influence of the 50th gate of total purity, of total idealism, but not intellectual idealism, of total space, of total white light. That place, that Kava Tzimtzum, runs all the way down through all the 50th gates. Umachniim es haklipa hakfira cheseres mipnei kedushas emunah hakshura be'ideal nitzri ki imcha mikor ha'chaim. Right, that light of this light from beyond the light, this light of the Giloy Ein Sof that runs straight through the Avir Eloi, straight through the Kava Tzimtzum, straight through the world of Atzilus, straight through the world of Bria, straight through the world of Yisira, straight through the world of Asiya into our world, and all the way back up again. Right? This light of pure emunah, where there's no klipas at all, that light runs up and down straight through the world, which gives us the ability to break through the suffering, which gives us the ability to break through the kfira, which gives us the ability to see into the darkness of Hashem's Yad Hashem coming through even the worst and the worst and the worst and the worst suffering. Right? And that's the emunah we need to learn, right, as we're learning right now. This deep, deep, amuk Emunah that comes from Pnimius HaTorah, of understanding that there is one source, one hand behind everything, right? And we live in the world of duality. There's an inside, there's an outside, there's a good, there's a bad. But in the world of non-duality, it's all one. It's like a famous teaching from the Ishbitzer. The Ishbitzer says, he says an amazing thing. The Ishbitzer says, it says, Macha zecher timcha amalek mitachas hashamayim. You need to wipe out Amalek, evil, from underneath the heavens. And how do you do that? By going above the heavens. Because above the heavens, ein zechira klal. Above the heavens, there is no ra at all. Only under the heavens, in the world of Asiya, in the world of duality, where it looks like there's good and bad, mitachas hashamayim, under the heavens it looks like there's bad. But how do you get rid of them? By going to the place of white light, by going above the heavens. Right? When you're in the airplane on the cloudy day and you're flying on the rainy day and you're flying above the clouds, there is no rain at all. Right? It's just goodness. Right? And we need to go to that place of Emunah to be mechazik ourselves, to see in the darkness, in the pain, in the suffering.